Hi, Kevin. Great to be here with you today, and hello to your listeners and your contact group because I know that they are people that are ready to grow. Oh, today we have a high of about 88, and in contrast to Dallas, we are quite dry, so it doesn't feel quite as hot. Yep. Absolutely. So Dynamic Team Solutions is a boutique consulting company, and we specialize and focus on interpersonal workplace relations. And we, in essence, we help businesses thrive by making sure that their most valuable employees, maybe even their partners and friends who they work with, not only want to come to work, not only want to show up, but they actually want to work with each other, because that's where the real power comes from. That's where the dynamic of the team comes from, is that collaboration and all that it brings to the table. Well, I would say in terms of what our company focuses on, it's a little bit of both, but primarily it's on the relationships people have with one another, but that lends itself to self-reflection, right? So, while we specialize in services that go from executive coaching to mediation and conflict resolution to team development and culture, change initiatives, at the end of the day, these all lend themselves, whether it's the one-on-one work with a coach, as a coach with one of our clients, or it's working with a whole team, it lends itself to a transformational process where everybody benefits, because, building insight in one has an impact on others. Yeah, we've lost sight of how to do that in many ways because, even today, we're not face to face talking. We're across a screen and across distance. And it's great to be able to look at each other while we're having our fun conversation. But it's also wonderful when you're face to face, and, just switching to that hybrid workforce and that remote workforce changed it. And we forgot how to react. We forgot how to interrelate. We forgot how to connect. And, I think just as humans, we're still struggling to get back to that place of being able to be present with other people in the ways we used to be. Yeah. In historically, not COVID speaking, it's that people become very they have their own internal monologue, I think, is really what it comes down to. They're thinking about what they need to say, what they need to get out there, what they want. They aren't necessarily processing it in a more connected world and saying, this is a conversation we're having, even if I'm the one making a request or a demand on somebody. I still have to know if they're receiving full information, if they know what to do with it, if they have questions, if they have concerns. It's a conversation. And I think more so now, because we're remote, it's a heightened problem. But I think it's always been the same, is that when we communicate through only our own lens, and we forget to have that broader perspective that other people, even in the best of circumstances, might not fully understand our intention, our rationale, our needs, our purpose. And so they make their best guess. And when you have a conversation, you can really flesh that stuff out better. I don't know that I have the perfect answer to that. This is not something that I routinely, use as part of my methodology, let's say, in teaching. But I think the real key is to just put down your armor of what your needs are and what your wants are. Don't worry that you'll forget your point. Don't worry that you're going to, take notes if you're a leader and you need to make sure you cover certain key things with another individual. There's no shame in having those with you. But really listen to that person, pay attention to how they're taking it in, watch their ability to process it, and ask questions. Just make sure that at the end of whatever it is you're saying, you're asking questions about what they understood, and then you're listening to ask questions of them. You're saying, I heard you asking for that. Why is that important to you? Or I heard, I sensed some friction when I requested that of you. Is there other stuff on your plate? Be ready to have it as a conversation. Be expecting that people are going to push back, even if it's that they're aligned, they're confused, or they're struggling to prioritize, or whatever else is happening. So I think the key is just putting down your own armor of what you need to say and focusing on what they are saying, or perhaps what they are not saying. That's key to attend to. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, from early on, and I've had my business for over 20 years now, and from early on when I worked with leaders and executives, they'd be the one that would find me. They'd bring me on because there's, early on, especially when my focus was almost exclusively conflict resolution and mediation, they'd bring me on and say, hey, these people in my company, they're important, they're valuable. We need to get them back on the same page, and they're not speaking to each other. There's so much friction, it's spilling out to other people. Go fix it. Okay, I'm going to go fix that. And I would find out very commonly that while I could help them fix their issue, it stemmed back from something the leader had said, the leader had done, an impact that was outside of the relationship that created change in the relationship. And early on, when I didn't have the foresight to know how to combat that before it ever was brought to my attention, it was intensely uncomfortable to go up to a leader and to tell them, hey, you're the problem here, actually. We've got to change you too. And I learned because of that it was far more powerful if I would enter into the conversation before I even began to work with the team. And I just say to that leader, if I find any of these issues stem back to you or your leadership skills, how would you like me to let you know? And I'd get this wonderful self-deprecating laugh, or this, sometimes just comical, oh, there wouldn't be anything that's my fault. But, it would be the sarcasm or the just ownership right up front, where they'd say, well, of course it's going to stem back to me. Just tell me what it is and I'll fix it. And it showed me what I already believed to be true, but just how genuinely every leader I encountered, they genuinely wanted to do right by their team. They wanted to be exceptional. They wanted to be the person their team needed them to be. They simply didn't know what they didn't know. And so when I would go back to them, if these situations came up, which of course they did, I would say, do you remember that time I asked you? And of course they'd laugh and they'd say, what did I do? And it just made it so much simpler, and it made it so much easier, because they started the conversation knowing they could do better and showing me they wanted to do better. So it just made the whole transition very easy, and it made it much more fluid for them to start bringing about change, because they basically admitted, hey, yes, I am going to be human. I am going to be unaware of certain things I'm doing that are creating an impact on others. And so when I wrote the book, the whole focus was to teach leaders what are the common threads of what they don't know, that because I've worked with thousands of leaders, I have had the powerful opportunity to see and to notice the trends and to pick up on the commonalities of what impacts leadership, what damages it, and what strengthens it. so writing this book was to say, hey, yes, you don't know everything, but I'm going to give you some concrete information on what you need to know that you would not get elsewhere and how to implement it. Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, it is the requirement, but it comes down to so much more. And you tapped into this. Their employees probably aren't going to share, and that's something I talk about in the book. That all the reasons you have this gap, and one of them is that your employees are probably reluctant to come to you, but even if they're very willing, very caring, and they share with you directly, they may still be missing the boat of what it actually is, because leadership development is not their specialty, right? It's, the intuition of how to address and fix these problems is not what they were guided in. It's not what their natural instincts and intuition are. They just know the impact on them and maybe on others. They don't know why that impact exists or what needs to change. And, this book is a self-help book in every way. It's a business book, but it is a self-help book because it will tell leaders what things they are doing by, I use stories, you probably saw that, by reviewing the stories of other leaders who've experienced those same situations. Because best of intentions, best of efforts, best of skills going into the situation do not lead to best of results when you have some of the problems I talk about. And the best of the best still have a coach. I mean, they still have support team around them. You can have the best, player in the world. You can have at his heyday, now I'm forgetting his name as I'm talking about him, the golfer. Tiger Woods. You can have Tiger Woods at the height of his career, and he still worked with coaches. He still had a caddy that would support his decision making, and he'd, bounce questions with. That's a natural part of growth, is to recognize you are always going to be only seeing things through one lens, and you need more. I mean, that's why people go to you. That's why they find me. That's why they read books, whether they're mine or other people's books. That's why we do that, is we know we're insulated in our own head. Absolutely. Same here. And, and we probably both see this in the clients we work with just as much as in our own experiences. You can hear the same message 12 times before you're able to implement it. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just that it's only knowledge at that early point. It's not implemented change, because it takes being able to know where that knowledge, even when it's valid, directly applies, how to use it and why to use it, and how to make it a consistent part of your world. It takes time. People need to be open to the fact change is not immediate, even when the knowledge is. Absolutely. I would love to. In fact, what I'd like to start off is just to share that one of the things I realized, and I have all this knowledge, but when you're going to put it into a book, you actually have to sort of hone the knowledge in a way that you can share it with others without it being 10,000 pages of nonsense. And granted, it wasn't easy to do. It took a long time. I spent 3 years on this book, but I realized as I was describing the situations and trying to teach the lessons within that the true strength of leadership, as I see it, is a three-legged stool. And it comes down to three core competencies that a leader must have. One is trust in their team, the team trusting them trusting their team. And trust is its own, massive topic. And let me just add one caveat in this. Honesty is the lowest rung on the trust ladder. Honesty is the basic. It is nothing that you need to be, oh, well, I always tell them the truth. So what? That's, yeah. What do you want, a cookie? Let's move on. Let's get to some stuff that really will build trust. Honesty is not the thing that we're looking for here. It's the expected piece. There's more that goes into it. The second part of the three-legged stool is role clarity. And by role clarity, I mean recognizing as a leader, your role isn't just to teach people how to do the job, just to supervise them doing it. It is to recognize the path ahead, to be the visionary for that path, which again, leaders very often have that. But then it's to make your team successful in getting down that path, which means finding ways to make it easier and taking away anything that creates a barrier or a hurdle. That's your job. And the extra part of your job is that third piece of the three-legged stool, which is manage conflict. And that's because conflict, which is always going to happen, and I'll explain why in a moment, conflict is one of the biggest barriers and hurdles, internal in an organization, and sometimes external if you have a vendor or a customer situation that can cause it. But most often when I'm talking to leaders about it, it's about what's happening internally. That creates a level of friction, which damages everything else. It damages trust. And by not doing it, you're obviously showing you don't have real clarity that that's your darn job. You must do that. And the conflict, why it's so, just a given, why leaders should recognize that is, and I think every leader can honestly acknowledge that they try and find the best people for the job, right? Our goal is to hire passionate, competent, excited, enthusiastic, skilled people. What happens when they encounter somebody else who has those same passions, intentions, enthusiasm, knowledge? They're not going to see eye to eye on everything, and that's going to cause friction. It doesn't mean it's bad. You build a better mousetrap if you harness it properly, rather than doing what will cause it to create more friction and less collaboration and less resolving of whatever differences of opinion need to be understood. I'd say one of the key things is transparency. Transparency meaning owning what you know and what you don't know, owning where you need help, where you made a mistake. All of that builds transparency because people know that you're not just glossing over something, and it enhances their ability to be as transparent as well. Transparency has a lot of pieces to it in and of itself, just like the concept of trust. This is just one element of it. there's pieces within, for example, you don't want to be transparent about everything. You know, I've come across leaders that are like, I'm very transparent with my team. I tell them what's going on in my personal life and I tell them what's happening with the company. And I'm like, hold the phone. There are limits to what you're transparent about. It is transparent about what directly impacts your team, transparent about the information they need, about doubts you have, so that, which doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know if our company is going to make it this season, but more, I'm concerned about our forward progression because we're not making these changes, these, you know, we're not completing these progress, you know, levels in the timely fashion we need to be. That's transparency that helps people to know to rally together. It builds trust. They know where they stand. They know what's needed of them. They know what's expected of them. And it creates reciprocity where people are likewise transparent. We talked about honesty. The third piece, which is kind of a reflection of transparency, is openness. Listening for people who say those things back to you, who tell you you are wrong, you made a mistake, that they, you know, didn't understand the deadline. Being open to understanding that that is something that is important, and being willing, even actively as a leader, engaging the people on your team to tell you those things. Say, you know, ask them directly, what am I missing? Who has anything contrary to say, so I can make sure we are building the best mousetrap and not forgetting that we actually need to have other steps in place that I've missed. You know, I have blind spots. You're going to have to tell me what they are. We're a team, right? So that openness to hearing it. And then respect, because if you don't demonstrate respect to your team, regardless of how well you do those other things, they will not have trust in you. You will not develop trust within their group. It'll just lead to a toxicity, regardless of what else is happening. And when you put those four pieces together, the transparency, the honesty, the openness, and the respect, it spells an acronym Thor. Thor, as we know, is a Norse god with a mighty hammer who caused storms, but Thor is also known for creating protection. And so what I impart to other people is, when you have transparency, honesty, openness, and respect on your team, as a leader, you bring that to the team and you expect that back from them and you create that. You bring protection. But if you fail in that, you bring the storms. Well, I would say the lack of the things we talked about, right? So of course, lack of respect, which you just said, and we talked about the honesty, that lowest rung, if people find out you're not honest with them about something. But when they feel that you're not sharing openly, when when there's that lack of transparency and you're closed off, you're not telling them the whole story, you're not trusting them in essence by sharing the information they might need, it tells them that they shouldn't trust either. And it creates a cyclical and like a downward spiral in the trust. The more closed you are, the more unsafe people feel. You know, we talk about psychological safety. That's where it comes from. When you're closed off, when you're not open to acknowledging your mistakes, what you could learn, where you need help, and you're not willing to, on the other flip side, encourage other people to do the same and make it safe, and be willing to take in feedback that you get. When you model that, you create trust. And when you model the opposite, you create distrust. And it doesn't take a lot to start changing that. But the first step, if you're going to change that, is to acknowledge to your team, you're making a change. That is your way of being transparent and honest and open and respectful from the first moment, is you just say, I realize we don't have enough trust on our team. It starts with me, and I'm going to make a change. And here's what you can expect from me from this point forward. And here's what I expect of you. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I would love to tag into that idea. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I would love to tag into that idea and say, when you own that and you have that humility, it makes people feel glad to contribute, but it also honors that you brought them in because they are competent. When you make people feel good about themselves and good about their contribution, you're going to keep them engaged. And, in a time when we're looking at so much turnover in the workplace and employers are, concerned and there's dozens of articles written every day about the great resignation and how to retain talent, and certainly my own clients are experiencing elements of that in their workforce, just because being remote has also created damage to the relationship that makes it more transactional and easier for people to leave. But when you honor your team by letting them know they are the experts that you rely on, you build them up that way, they're more apt to stay. They feel valued, they feel a part of something. Oh, they're women. No, they're women between the age of 35 and 60. No, I'm just being facetious there. But what I really like is leaders who recognize they have a problem and are eager to get help, and those who are willing to be self-reflective. I honestly can say, with very rare exception, the people I work with in organizations become on a professional level, I must say, for the most part, but they're like friends to me. We'll be on a call for a half an hour and 5 minutes of it was business and the rest it became personal because we sorted out the issue. We talked about what was happening, and then we kind of work into, and I shouldn't say it's social and personal, there's maybe a small element, but we'll spill into general workplace conversations because they'll say, oh, let me tell you, almost like the soap opera conversation. Let me tell you what else is happening here. And through that sharing, I can offer more wisdom and more support because I have natural, talents and instincts and intuitions that I can provide to them. But, they get the added value, but I get the enjoyment of being a part of their growth in a way that just supporting their team or a small segment of their company doesn't provide. And I love that. So, one of the things I really enjoy is that, and working with people who are open to being that way with me. But like I said, most of our clients, because they start off, they usually find us because they're in some level of pain, which is the case for, I think, most professionals, most consultants. But ours is often something with regard to there being a level of dysfunction or conflict or friction or something that's undermining progression. That's usually where people find us. A lot of them find us through their employment attorney when they're having something going on that's a problem. So we come in at a time when they're in pain, and I love it when they come to us and they're just super transparent with what's happening, what's worrying them, and what they want to see change. It's not always what we end up agreeing to do. Sometimes their idea of what needs to change and my knowledge of what needs to change are not perfectly aligned, and I'll tell them that. So, well, here's actually how I'm looking at it, and here's what I'm seeing. What do you think? And, again, they come to us because they know we're the experts, but they'll say, oh, I think you're right. I think that's the direction to take. So I really like working with leaders who have that willingness to, openly talk about what's happening and accept help that we can provide. And I think that's probably true across every consultant. I imagine you would say the same things, Kevin. People that are willing to be open to the support we can provide are my favorite people to work with. I think what's super important about how it connects to the remote and the hybrid world is that the same skills are equally, if not more important. And so as a leader, building trust is suddenly going to be of even higher importance, because otherwise you have a transactional team who are apt to leave if they get a better opportunity, or if they get bored because they're not connecting, they don't feel vital and involved. And so, the way to build that trust is through, and I'm going to weave kind of all the concepts of the three-legged stool together, but I recommend that meetings that are super productive. And first, there's the one-on-one meetings. And I read a great book called I'm forgetting the name, The 9 Lies of Leadership, maybe. It's by, I'll have to look it up in a second and give you the name. Ashley Goodall and Marcus Buckingham are the authors. And it talks about one of the 9 lies is that, something about how many people you can manage. And what I learned from that, which I was surprised to learn, but they discuss how to know how many people you can have on your team, how many people you should manage. And it's how many people you can manage each week in one-on-one meetings. And the idea is that if you have meetings less frequently than one-on-one, to really get into it, not on tasks, but on process. Like, what are your hurdles? Which comes back to what I talk about in the book. What is working well? What are your hurdles? How can I help? Basically, those 3 questions. You can manage as many people as you can actually attend to when they answer those 3 questions. If you can't attend to more than 2, then your management is of 2 people. If you can somehow do 12 or 20 or 30, okay. But it just means you probably have less other tasks on your plate if you're able to provide that much support to that large a group. And so when it comes to the one-on-one, it's to have those meetings that are really productive, which is what builds trust. And it shows you understand your role is to take care of those. But also team meetings. And we have everyone that's probably listening to this podcast knows team meetings are like the bane of everyone's existence, because they are boring and they are not productive and they feel like a waste of time and a waste of energy, and you're not getting anything out of it. And that's because nobody knows how to do team meetings the right way. And they involve a huge part of role clarity, not just the leader knowing their role, but that's part of it. But every single person on that team needs to know how they impact and connect with everybody else in the flow of work. Who is interfering with the progress? Who is supporting it? Who do you need help from? And who can you help? That's what a meeting is about, nothing else. Do not report what you did last week. Nobody cares. Unless it's a huge success or a huge calamity, it doesn't require much, if any, airtime. Let the leader be the one that applauds the successes and acknowledges it and acknowledges the calamities and asks everybody to pitch in and how we can roll up our sleeves and make a difference. But otherwise, how can I help? What help do I need? Where am I heading with things? What are the hurdles in my way that are affecting it? Whose work can support mine? Whose can I support? Those are the things that matter. And that's also where you can see if there's friction and conflict, because you can see how people are reacting to each other. So you can manage it as a leader as well. But that's how the remote world can start creating meetings that build connection, because people see how their work relates to each other, how they can help each other. It starts to build a level of connection that they may not have face to face, but they can have even if they're remote. Yeah. Okay. Is to know that help is available. I mean, it sounds maybe a little trite, but help is available. You're stuck in chaos because you can't get out of your head. Get out of your head, find someone that can be that help for you. That I enjoy spending time with my kids, and I try and preserve that as often as I can. I love works by Brene Brown. And I actually have a business book club, which is what's really helped me to inspire reading more books and like the book I mentioned. And I have to say any book that I'm currently reading is my favorite book because I just fall in love with it. But I think the book that I mentioned is called The 9 Lies About Work. And I read it because I thought, oh, this book is interesting. What could it possibly teach me? And I swear every one of those 9 lies, there was a part when I was listening to it saying, I'm not so sure about that. And then I'd be turned around to a different point of view. So I love books that challenge me to see the world differently. And of course, Adam Grant's great book, Think Again, which speaks to that exact mindset of don't always think you know everything. There's more to know. Oh, I love that. And I wish I had a perfect answer canned and ready to go. One message to the world is that you can make a positive difference. Freedom to me, it sort of speaks to me being outdoors and unencumbered by technology. For everybody, let's all do that. Oh, I would love for them to want to learn more. Thank you. Going to my website, which is dynamicteamsolutions.org, or my author website, which is CandiceGottlieb-Clark.com. And I also offer on either of those sites, you can find a link to get 2 free chapters of my book, so you can check it out without having to commit. And I know you'll love it, so you'll commit afterward. But if you're not ready, that's the way to do it. And if you are, you can find it on Amazon. Thank you, Kevin. I just want to thank your listeners for joining us today. Kevin, you're an amazing coach and leader in your own right. I love that we got a chance to have a conversation today, and I hope to have many more.